The Buddha said in the 10 Dharmas Sutra, the Dasha Dharma Sutra, that just as water is known from a waterfowl and fire is known from smoke, an intelligent bodhisattva's lineage is known from their signs. So the Buddha, being skilled in means, he taught these correct effect signs, as they're known, by way of analogy and the actual meaning indicated by this sutra passage. So the analogies he presents are knowing fire from smoke and knowing water through the presence of a waterfowl. So these analogies are indicating something more profound. They're telling us that based on certain external signs, we can also know internal profound qualities of beings. So due to a waterfowl, like a bird that is known to circle water for a long time, looking for fish because it has that nature that inclines it to do so. You can correctly infer the presence of water in the distance if you see that bird circling in the sky for a long time, right? Because there is a connection between the two. And likewise, we know that the cause of smoke is fire. So if you see smoke in the distance, you know that there is fire. And these analogies are used to indicate that based on external signs of a person who sees the suffering of beings and that gives them goosebumps and that makes them cry, we can correctly infer that they have the internal quality of bodhicitta. So therefore, what this is really showing is that because bodhicitta is such a profound mind, it is so precious, it gives rise to these external physical conventions in the persons whom have given birth to this mind. In general, it's difficult to realize whether a person actually has bodhicitta in their mind stream, right? Of course, we can't see what's in other people's minds, but based on certain external conventions, as just described, you can infer it. But still, with bodhicitta, it's very difficult. But let's bring it down to the level of something we can understand. We can understand generally if people are kind-hearted or not, right? Based on their mannerisms and so forth, right? Their actions. So there is a connection there between physical conventions and internal qualities that we can infer. Moreover, bodhicitta is not something that is only given rise to by, let's say, famous, impressive people or people of a certain race and so on and so forth. Anybody can give rise to bodhicitta if they train their mind in the stages to do so. So that includes all 6 types of beings within samsara. They are all able to give rise to bodhicitta. So the fact that we are here today able to study and try to cultivate bodhicitta ourselves is entirely thanks to ourselves in our previous lives and what we did in our previous lives. So we should always sort of recollect the kindness of our previous continuum in our previous life, because that has gotten us where we are today. And likewise, us being able to continue our practice in our next life depends entirely upon what we choose to do in this life. Okay, so because the Buddha said that bodhicitta is able to be generated by all 6 types of beings within samsara, I'm going to briefly explain these beings. The Buddha has said in sutra that explicitly that bodhicitta can be given rise to by gods and humans. Moreover, he has said that it can be given rise to by nagas, because in sutra he pointed to a particular naga that had given rise to bodhicitta, and likewise in the sutras it talks of hell beings too that can give rise to bodhicitta, and then in the greater commentaries they talk of hungry ghosts and likewise animals. So Geshe actually provided all these sutra quotations, but I don't have them unfortunately right now. But perhaps I can provide them for you later. I'll ask Geshe for them. I did ask him to send me all the quotations beforehand, but there we go. So anyway, the fact that it is indicated in sutra that bodhicitta can be given rise to by all six types of beings, therefore we can be sure ourselves as human beings that we are fully capable of giving rise to bodhicitta if we set our minds to it. So bodhicitta, or Mahayana mind generation, this conventional mind generation, is said to possess two types of aspiration. So these two types of aspiration that are always spoken about with respect to bodhicitta are, number one, the aspiration that strives for the welfare of others, and number two, the aspiration that strives towards full enlightenment. So these are the two
谢谢师父。
aspirations. And if we are trainees in cultivating bodhicitta, then we need to focus on these two. So the aspiration that strives for the welfare of others is the thought, may I accomplish the welfare of all others. The aspiration for enlightenment or for one's own welfare is the recognition that at present I myself have zero capacity to accomplish the welfare of all sentient beings. So therefore, I must now cultivate bodhicitta and achieve Buddhahood in the future so that I may teach the Dharma to sentient beings and establish them into enlightenment. So in terms of the order in which these aspirations are generated, first you cultivate the aspiration that strives for the welfare of others, right? And then based on that, you cultivate the aspiration towards full enlightenment. In terms of the order in which these goals are achieved, it's the opposite. You first achieve enlightenment yourself, and thereby, having achieved that, you are able to establish other beings into full enlightenment, thereby accomplishing their welfare. For example, take Buddha Shakyamuni himself. Before he achieved full enlightenment, when he was a trainee, he developed the aspiration, may I achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And based on that, he accumulated 3 countless great eons worth of merit, practiced the paths, achieved Buddhahood, accomplished the 4 kayas, right, the 4 Buddha bodies, the emanation body, the enjoyment bodies, and so forth. Then he turned the wheels of Dharma and thereby accomplished the welfare of beings. He not only accomplished the welfare of beings in his lifetime, he still continues to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings right now. So that is the order by which it happens, right? First, you develop the aspiration, and then later on, through achieving Buddhahood yourself, you're able to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. So what should we be imagining when we think, I wish to achieve full enlightenment for the sake of all beings? Well, that particular enlightenment that you imagine when you cultivate bodhicitta should be the enlightenment that is possessed of the 4 Buddha bodies. So the 4 Buddha bodies are the emanation body, right? The physical body that ordinary beings in the world could see, the complete enjoyment body that's visible to Arya Bodhisattvas, the wisdom truth body, which is the Buddha's mind, and the nature truth body, which is the nature of the Buddha's mind. So, thinking of it this way, it is only in possession of all these four bodies that one is truly able to accomplish the ultimate welfare of all sentient beings, which is also setting them into full enlightenment. So, because we require those, that's what you should imagine when you think, may I achieve enlightenment for all sentient beings. Now we're going to turn back to Essence of Refined Gold and look down in the section of training the mind on the path of the persons of greatest capacity. So we've already looked at the paths in common with persons of smaller and middling capacity. And please always recollect that those paths in common with beings of those scopes are not irrelevant to training in the path of the great scope. They are the prerequisites. First, you must train in paths in common with those of beings of smaller capacity, then of beings of middling capacity, before you move on to persons of the paths of persons of greater capacity. So we'll read the first paragraph in the section on training the mind and the path of persons of great capacity. So it says, generating bodhicitta. Although through the higher trainings in ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, you can attain nirvana or complete liberation from cyclic existence, this attainment in itself is not sufficient. Although one who has gained nirvana no more wanders in samsara, because only a part of his faults have been overcome and only a portion of perfection has been attained, he has not fulfilled his own purpose. There's no masculine or feminine in the Tibetan, by the way. It's not talking about men, it's gender neutral. Also, because he lacks omniscience, he has not fulfilled others' purposes. So, if you do not practice the accumulations of method and wisdom and train your mind through having bodhicitta in your continuum, then you can still achieve liberation from samsara, as the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas do, by cultivating the wisdom realizing selflessness, right? But through merely exiting samsara, you're not able to fully accomplish the welfare of others. And you have not accomplished your own welfare. And this is because you don't have the full capacity. You lack the four Buddha bodies to be able to fully accomplish what other beings need. And you haven't achieved your own perfect welfare because you have only eliminated a portion of the faults or defilements, not all of them that would get you to Buddhahood. So therefore, one needs to enter the Mahayana in order to be fully capable to help others and also to achieve one's own perfect aims. Buddhahood is not only for oneself. Buddhahood is also for the sake of all other mother sentient beings who currently suffer within samsara. In order to help them get out of samsara, we ourselves must first achieve Buddhahood so that we may teach all other mother sentient beings the Dharma, whereby they can get the help they need to exit samsara or achieve Buddhahood themselves. So, in essence, this is what bodhicitta is. It's that intention. So, reading down in Essence of Refined Gold. So, look to the goal of complete Buddhahood, the ultimate fulfillment of both your own and others' purposes. Moreover, do not think to gain Buddhahood merely for your own benefit. Aspire for it purely to be able to benefit all sentient beings more extensively and effectively. Just as you have fallen into the ocean of samsara, so have all others. They, like you, know only its misery. There is no one who has not repeatedly been your father and mother, and who has not shown you unimaginable kindness. It is only fair that if you gain liberation and omniscience, you should free them from anguish too. To benefit them, you must reach the state of pureless, non-abiding nirvana of Buddhahood. Thus, generate supreme bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude. So just like we have fallen into samsara and suffer, likewise all other mother sentient beings, as limitless as space, have fallen into samsara, are present here now, and continue to suffer. It is only just that we try to free them from suffering too, since they have shown us unimaginable kindness by being our parents in the past. There is not a single sentient being who has not been one's mother or father. So therefore we owe it to them to return the favor, return the kindness, and help them exit from this suffering state. So it says, thus generate supreme bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude. Well, now is the time to meditate on mind generation, bodhicitta. What does it mean to meditate on something? Meditation is simply to familiarize yourself with a mental object, right? A lot of the time when we think about meditation, we think meditating on emptiness or impermanence, involving placing your mind on that object and keeping it there single-pointedly. So that would be an example of what we call placement meditation. When it comes to how we're going to meditate on minds like bodhicitta and great compassion, it's more of a situation of faking it until you make it, right? So first you cultivate a semblance of bodhicitta. You have to basically fake the mind, contrive it. And out of the two types of meditation, which is analytical meditation and placement meditation, most of the mind training you find in the Lam Rim is analytical meditation, such as this. So first, in order to set our minds before we try to cultivate bodhicitta, we have to calm them down and get our minds into a state that's pliable and actually able to stay focused on a virtuous object. Because now, if we go straight into trying to focus our mind, the opposite happens. We start thinking of all sorts of random things and we can't stay focused, which is normal. So, in order to lessen this distractedness or sort of trick our minds to stay focused on an object, it's first of all important to relax, quite simply. So, because of too much excitement, for example, one's not able to stay focused on a virtuous object. And the antidote to this is actually focusing on breathing, right? To relax the mind so that instead of it going towards non-virtuous objects, we can direct it first to a neutral object like the breath. And then once we're able to stay on a neutral object, we can then direct our mind towards a virtuous object like bodhicitta. So in order to create a nice basis, we're going to meditate for a few minutes on the breath. So while we engage in breathing meditation, as it says in the greater treatises within Buddhism, we should adopt the 7-point Vairochana posture. So that involves first crossing the legs And if you're unable to do so, that's fine. You can also half cross them or get as close as possible, right? Whatever you're able to do. And then one positions the hands one on top of the other. So you can put your right hand flat on top of your left hand in your lap. And then it's important to keep a straight back, because if you have a straight posture, that straightens out your inner channels within your body, which allows the winds or the lung to flow freely throughout the channels. And if the winds can flow freely, then you have more physical pliancy, right? You're able to set your body to what you need it to do. So your eyes, likewise, shouldn't be closed completely, because if you close your eyes, then all you see is darkness, and that will induce lethargy. So you don't want them fully open either, just sort of closed, sort of open, like that. Your lips and your teeth should just be placed naturally, what feels comfortable to you. You shouldn't hold them tightly shut, right? Just let them rest naturally. And as we said, because your eyes aren't completely closed, you should be directing your gaze towards the tip of your nose. Because if you let your gaze go anywhere, then it's going to induce either lethargy or excitement. So keep it in the general direction of the tip of your nose and straighten out your shoulders. If you can't do any of these, that's fine, right? The main point here isn't body posture, it's meditating within the mind. So that's entirely acceptable if you can't do any one of these. So the important thing is that you're in a position that enables you to meditate. So essentially, you know your body the best. So whatever is best for you to be able to focus, right? If you can't do the 7-point Varochana posture, no problem. If you can, that's great. So that's the physical pliancy that we want as a basis for meditation. Likewise, you want uh, sort of a speech pliancy, you could say, in the sense that you don't want to be distracting yourselves by reciting mantras and so forth. And your mind, we want to be able to focus on an object, to rest on an object without going all over the place. So now we're going to count the breath, right? Meditation on the breath involves counting it, at least according to the greater treatises within Buddhism. So one breath in and one breath out is considered one, right? Your breath shouldn't be too strong. It shouldn't be too short. It should be your natural breath. So don't force your breath to be one way or the other. And in doing so, it is said that this will stop distractedness and discursive thought, right? Vasubandhu has said it in his uh, treatise on Abhidharma that counting the breath is an antidote to distractedness. So we know quite well that this is a very helpful meditation because there is so much attention given to this in the West. Wherever you go, schools, even jails are now promoting mindfulness meditation and counting the breath and so forth, right? Geshe said his friends say that wherever they go, they encounter people who say, please teach me how to meditate and this sort of meditation. And that's because it actually does help, right? It helps calm us down and it helps us focus. Okay, so now we're going to start the meditation. Remember, your focal object is your own breath. One breath counts as an inward and outward exhalation. And remember, Don't close your eyes completely and don't open them too wide. Okay. Geshe is asking you all, is your mind getting distracted while you do this? Does it go here and there? So this is a fundamentally helpful beginner practice to start training our minds to relax and be less distracted, right? Counting the breath to stop distraction. This is really helpful in your day-to-day life. For example, sometimes your mind gets really agitated and you start fighting with your family members or spouse and so forth. So when that happens, it can be good to sort of recognize that your mind is disturbed and to go into a quiet space by yourself and just spend a few minutes coming back to your breath and relaxing your mind and stopping all this discursive thought. It's quite helpful for that. This isn't a practice we use to waste time or just take up some of our time during the day. It's a It's simple, but it's also a very profound practice. It's a practice that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas recognized that would help give rise to realizations in their continuum, right? To stop all this discursiveness, to create a better foundation with which to cultivate virtuous qualities. So that now that we've sort of relaxed our mind a bit and the gross afflictions have sort of subsided for now, on this basis, we're going to meditate on bodhicitta. So within the word bodhicitta, which is a compound word, you have two separate words, bodhi and chitta, right? Enlightenment and mind. when the Tibetans translated Bodhi into Tibetan, they translated it as Changchup, which again has two syllables, two words that mean different things. Together, in these two words, Changchup or Bodhi, are the desired object of others and oneself, right? It's what will fulfill the welfare of oneself and all others. And if we look at what it means etymologically, Chang means to purify. So it is acknowledging a Buddha's purification of all afflictions through the accumulation of the collections and performing mind training, right? All the afflictions are abandoned. So thus one is purified, one is Chang. And Chup has a connotation of understanding. So having completely abandoned the two types of obscurations, afflictive and knowledge obscurations, together with their seeds. One is no longer obscured with respect to all objects of knowledge. So one therefore has completely expanded one's mind in the sense that one understands everything, and therefore one is chup or chuba. So therefore, that is what enlightenment really is, chang chup. And then chitta or mind, in this context, is the wish to achieve. So the wish to achieve that state of enlightenment. So with respect to such a state that belongs to the victors, it exists as the future enlightenment of others and also our own future enlightenment. But in the context of meditating on bodhicitta, we're going to focus on our own future Buddhahood and therefore give rise to the thought, may I achieve that state in the future. So we're going to give rise to this aspiration right now. May I achieve this state for the sake of all others. Of course, it might be difficult to envision what our future Buddhahood will actually look like. So when you think about achieving your future Buddhahood for the sake of others, use the example of Buddha Shakyamuni's Buddhahood, right? That we're more familiar with and think, may I achieve that state in my future for the sake of all other sentient beings. So when it comes to what we're going to meditate on right now, what we've just described is the object of attainment. And what we're going to focus on as an object of meditation is the thought, may I achieve that for the sake of all other mother sentient beings, right? Just that thought. Now, please meditate on that. So if we meditate for too long, then we will encounter other difficulties. So the greater treatises advise to meditate in small chunks of time. So while you were meditating on bodhicitta, and likewise while you were meditating on the breath, was there a difference in the amount of distractions that you had? So while you meditate on bodhicitta, it would make more sense that your mind can rest there a bit longer because it's such a precious and profound mind. Um, but you do have to put a lot of effort into it. If you think about it, we have all the conditions complete for giving rise to bodhicitta, right? We're quite fortunate in our rebirth. So what is the reason that we cannot actually give rise to it right now? Well, the main fault that we have is that we cherish ourselves above all others, right? This thought of I, that is constantly present is the self-cherishing attitude. If you think in a 24-hour time period, hardly a moment goes by where you don't use the word I, right? You're constantly saying, I need to drink, I need to eat, and not really focusing on others like, oh, he needs to drink, he needs to eat. It's mostly directed towards oneself, one's own concerns. So fundamentally due to self-cherishing, we are not able to give rise to bodhicitta at present. In order to give rise to that mind of bodhicitta, we need to accumulate merit and purify our obscurations. If you look at the way Shantideva structured his text, The Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he dedicates the first chapter to inspiring people to give rise to bodhicitta by describing its excellences and the benefits one would obtain if one were to give rise to bodhicitta. And then once the trainee has recognized these benefits and wants to give rise to bodhicitta, the trainee needs to engage in confession, right? So his second chapter is called Confession, and it also includes the practices such as making offerings and making praises and so forth. These can all be considered branches of confession. Giving rise to bodhicitta is not easy, right? If it were so easy, we would already have it. And because it's not easy, we need to recognize why, and we need to implement the methods that start to clear away the obstacles to giving rise to it. So therefore, we need to accumulate collections of merit and slowly purify our obscurations. And this acts as a perfect support to then give rise to bodhicitta. So as I just said, if you give rise to it, there are said to be many benefits. And in Shantideva's first chapter of his Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he talks of many benefits, but in particular, he speaks of 6 benefits by way of analogy. So there are temporary and ultimate benefits to giving rise to bodhicitta. And for example, someone who has just newly given rise to bodhicitta, so a brand new bodhisattva, even if they may have accumulated myriads of deeds that would send them to hell upon their death, through their newfound bodhicitta, this bad karma is purified. And likewise, through their bodhicitta, they effortlessly increase their karma to take good rebirths. So that's one example of the benefits of bodhicitta. Verse number 10 in the first chapter of Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life presents an analogy of bodhicitta, and it's the analogy for transforming the inferior into the supreme. So the verse itself reads, "For like the supreme substance of the alchemists, it takes our impure flesh and makes of it the body of a Buddha. a jewel beyond all price. Such is bodhicitta. Let us grasp it firmly. The analogy presented in this verse is the supreme substance of the alchemists, which is sometimes translated as a philosopher's stone. Right? This is a concept, at least in our own culture, of a substance that when it comes into contact with something inferior like plain metal, it is able to transform it into gold. So that's the analogy. The meaning is presented as if you give rise to bodhicitta in your continuum, it has the power to transform your filthy body, right? That is filthy by way of 36 substances, it's sometimes said, such as snot, pus, and blood, and transform it into the body of a Buddha. So how can it do this, right? It's because bodhicitta itself is so powerful and it uses such an analogy, right, as the philosopher's stone or the supreme substance of alchemists. So getting a basic idea of the preciousness of bodhicitta like this, we then need to practice to generate bodhicitta that we have not generated and to increase and let flourish bodhicitta that we have already given rise to. It's incredible to think that such a inferior, wretched thing as our own body could be transformed into the body of a Buddha, but such is said to be the power of bodhicitta. If you look at examples in the sutras, like the example of Buddha Shakyamuni himself, around the age of 29, he left his family, his kingdom, and his son behind to pursue enlightenment. And what could motivate such a thing? Well, it was bodhicitta that motivated him to do that, to be able to give up so much for the sake of others. Also, if you look to a later example of Atisha around the 11th century, he went to Indonesia where his Lama Serlingpa, his name is in Tibetan, or sometimes called Sri Dharmakirti of the Golden Isles, was living, and it was a 12-month journey apparently for him to get there. And once he arrived, he stayed for many months receiving instructions from Serlingpa on bodhicitta. So why go to all this effort? Well, it indicates to us that this mind of bodhicitta is so precious that it's worth dedicating so much of our time and effort towards cultivating it. Bodhicitta must be cultivated in stages, and a lot of hard work is required to give rise to it. Bringing it down to an example that we can understand. In society, being kind is considered a very important quality. If you think that there's one person in a family unit who is really kind and patient, when that family is agitated or a fight breaks out, that's the person in the family who is going to calm everybody down by offering words of wisdom, advice, and through demonstrating patience to everyone. So you can see the preciousness on even the level of simple kindness that what it brings to a situation. Kindness is something that we need to cultivate, whether in the office or at home, right? It's clear that being kind to others not only makes them happy, but it makes oneself happy. And not only kindness, it's incredibly important to cultivate patience, right? Whether in the office or at home. We all have faults, right? But what we tend to do is to only look at the faults of others, where what we should be doing is looking at our own faults as well, right? So instead of just focusing on others' faults and giving them advice, be more balanced and recognize that you yourself also, or we ourselves also have faults. if we approach situations in this way, we're much less likely to get agitated or hostile at others or start bossing them around, right? Through recognizing that we all have faults, we are more inclined to just be more friendly towards others.
That's what,
Does anybody have any questions?